Hey guys, welcome to AP Psych. This is your very first video lecture in our flipped classroom. With you right now, you guys should have your notes to go along with the video. Feel free to pause at any time. Remember that you are always going to have these videos available to you for review or to look back onto. Our very first unit is the scientific foundations, which talks about a lot of the basics. So the history, the approaches, and how we conduct different studies and experiments in psychology. In this unit, we're going to talk about the different methods and how we look at research, as well as what makes research ethical. But before we get into all of that, we have to look at the basics. What exactly is psychology? Psychology, we look at the basic behaviors and our mental processes. Psychology surrounds us everywhere. Psychology is one of the parts of education that you are always going to have experience with. You're always going to have some sort of contact with, whether it's why a different commercial came on and you decided to order something online, or even if you're at the mall, why you chose to buy a shirt over another shirt. So, our three components of psychology are science, so our scientific method, our hypothesis, what goes on, behavior, what we can actually see, and our mental processes, so our thoughts, our feelings, what are our drives behind what we do, our motives, and all of that. So within psychology, we also have many, many goals. And our 4 goals that we're going to look at this year are to describe behavior, and empirical designs and ideas. So what comes from our experiences? Let's say you want to touch the stove after you just cooked something. When you watch someone do that, you could probably see that they touch the stove and they move their hand back very quickly. To predict behavior. After the very first time that they have touched it, do you think they're going to go and touch the stove again? Probably not. 3, to explain behavior. Maybe they had never touched a stove before and they wanted to see what it was like. Or to influence behavior. Maybe you're the older sibling and you want to be like, hey, I dare you to touch that. Our history of psychology. We really focus on a couple main people in this very first unit. And one of the most important people is Wilhelm Wundt. So I want you guys in your notes to highlight this guy, circle, put stars around it, make it bolder if you need to, highlight the box he's in, but you need to know him. He is known as the father of psychology, which somewhere along the side of your notes, I would like you to put that in there and also highlight. Again, he is the father of psychology. And in 1879, he established the very first psychology lab and conducted experiments. And he was the first guy to be like, I wonder why these people are doing what they're doing. So some of our more well-known people are Socrates and Plato. They believe that our mind is separate from the body, and those two don't interact. Aristotle, who said mind and body are completely and 100% in sync with one another. And then later down the road, we have René Descartes, who believed that, again, mind and body were separate. But they all kind of had this idea that there was empiricism, that our knowledge and what we learn does in fact come from the experiences we go through. So Wilhelm Wundt had this idea of structuralism. And he identified the structures of the mind and how they are formed. And this can be a little confusing. So if you think about it, if you were looking to design and engineer parts for a car, a structuralist would look at the different parts of the engine. So the different pistons and where the gasoline is going to be stored, and what type of engine is it going to be, an inline 5, a V6, a V8, what's it going to be like? And within structuralism, they always looked at introspection. So they're looking inside. And we as teachers and educators, and even as students, use introspection almost daily. At the end of the day, we always look back and say, did I do a good job? Did I reach my full potential? It's very much like self-reflection. Where on the other hand, we have William James, and he had the idea of functionalism. So William James, who again is another big person for this unit, which make sure you highlight and put stars by this guy, has described psychology as the science of the mental life. And he wanted practical applications to life. And this is where you as students, even when I was a student, said, all right, how does this apply to the real world? Because if it doesn't apply, I don't really want to focus on it. So if you look into psychology with William James, you would see that it would be like washing your hands. A functionalist would say, hey, we don't want germs, we don't want to get sick. Whereas a structuralist would look at the soap, look at your hands, look at the germs, and see how they could all work together. Also deals with your streams of consciousness, so what's going on in your head. And this guy was the very first American psychologist. So he's known as the father of American psychology, where Wilhelm Wundt was the father of all psychology. And as psychology progressed, we started seeing other ideas. And I'm sure from a middle school or even biology class in high school, you guys recognize the name Charles Darwin. And he had the whole idea on survival of the fittest and wrote the book on the origins of species. But pretty much the strong survive. The weak do not. And he had this idea of natural selection, and depending on what characteristics you had, dictated whether or not you were going to survive and whether reproduction was in your favor. Of course, we all know that environmental changes also could influence and change evolution as well. So we're going to kind of look at how all of these ideas tie in, and we're going to do that through different approaches. And psychology has 7 different approaches: biopsychosocial, behavioral, psychodynamic or psychoanalytic, humanistic, cognitive, evolutionary, and sociocultural. So our first one is the biopsychosocial, and it focuses on 3 things: biological, psychological, and social influences. So biologically, our physical health, our mental health, our brain, our nervous system. We're going to look at different factors like our testosterone or hormone levels. Psychologically, our mood, our personality, our behavior. Are you the type of student that always gets in trouble, or are you the type of student that always gets a positive referral? And then our social, our cultural, our family, and socioeconomic status. You never know who the person in the room, that could be a bajillionaire or the person who has to help work to help their family. Our second approach is the behavioral approach, and this focuses on observable behaviors and rewards and punishments. So behaviors are always observable. You guys can go into the cafeteria and pick out one person that's usually doing something right, and occasionally people that are doing something not right. Behavioral approach, we care about what we can see. The mental processes, since they're private and in our thought and in our own heads, we don't really care about them with this approach. Notable behaviorists are John Watson and B.F. Skinner, who we will talk about more in other units. But they were just like, we don't really care about what you think. We just want to look at what you do and why you're doing it. Our psychodynamic and psychoanalytic approach is associated with the unconscious and what we're not aware of, so very opposite from the previous approach. Looks at our drives and our conflicts, our past, dreams. If you're somebody who has had a troubled childhood, you probably have memories that are repressed or forgotten, and you just kind of block them out of your memory. Next, we have the humanistic approach, which emphasizes positive human qualities. So, whether we're here to support one another, positive growth, free will, are we striving to do our very best? Humanistic theorists that are notable in this topic are Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow, who again, in later units, we're going to talk about a ton. Approach number 5 emphasizes the mental processes involving in how we think, how we process information, remembering, knowing how to recall information, and communicating. So, if you're paying attention and still with me in these notes, I want you guys to just draw like a little thought in this box. Okay? Approach number 6, our evolutionary approach. Again, those ideas with Charles Darwin. It uses ideas like adaptation, reproduction, natural selection to explain human behavior. In our most primal days, we looked at other humans as, that's a good person to reproduce with. I will mate with them. That's how humans survived. That's how animals survived. Approach number 7, sociocultural approach, examines how social and cultural environments influence behavioral and mental processes. So, how are we humans alike as members of one family? And then how are we different from other families? What are our morals and our goals between different cultures? And then lastly in this unit, we're going to be talking about different careers in psychology. And these are some very, very basic ones. But a psychiatrist, which this is very important, prescribes medication and has to go to medical school to do so. First, a psychologist cannot prescribe medication, and they do not attend medical school. Some psychologists also perform research in labs, look at different studies, and then there's always teaching. And not just high school teacher, middle school teacher, elementary school teacher. I'm also talking about professors and educational psychologists. So again, in this unit, we talk about a ton. This is just Unit 1, Part 1. We still have a couple more. But I hope you guys enjoyed your very first video in our flipped classroom. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.